Welcome to the Simply Accounting Intelligence Getting Started program. In this session, I will demonstrate how to create a simple pivot table using Microsoft Excel 2007. The following points will be covered in the video: the concept of a pivot table, the layout of a pivot table, and how to create a simple pivot table. An important point to remember when working with pivot tables is that you are working with a layout slightly different to a normal Excel worksheet. A pivot table has its own toolbar, and that alone provides functionality specific to the pivot table and not to a normal Excel cell on the worksheet. Although one can format a cell using the Format menu, a pivot table provides its own Format Cells option on its toolbar, as it is created as a separate entity. 4 key reasons for organizing data into a pivot table are to summarize the data contained in a lengthy list into a compact format, to find relationships within the data that are otherwise hard to see because of the amount of detail, to organize the data into a format that's easy to chart, and to view the same data in many different ways quickly and easily. A pivot table has its own layout and is split up into 4 sections. There is the Report Filter section. This section assists in providing a third dimension to your data. It can also provide a more summarized, filtered view of the rest of the fields displayed in other sections. When placing a field in this section, it therefore reduces the number of items within a pivot table, and in some instances prevents the pivot table's number of items limitation from being reached. If you include a page field in your pivot table, you can choose to display the pivot table pages on separate worksheets. The column labels. One would place fields in this section when wanting to group the data by a specific field, for example by customer. Your customers will appear in the columns going across the worksheet. Row labels. One would place fields in this section when wanting to group the data by a specific field. For example, customer. Your customers will appear in the rows going down the left-hand side of the worksheet. Values. One would normally place fields in this section where their values are numbers, such as quantity or amount. The pivot table field list contains the fields available for your pivot table, based on the fields in the data range that the pivot table is based on. You can add or remove fields from the pivot table by dragging and dropping them into or out of the field list. To create a pivot table, you need to identify these 2 elements in your data. Have a list in Microsoft Excel with data fields, with headings and rows of related data. Identify which fields are going to go where in your design. Select any cell in the data list. From the Insert tab in the Tables group, select Pivot Table. Insert, Pivot Table. Make sure that Select a Table or Range is selected. Make sure your data is listed in the Table Range box. Select where you'd want the pivot table to go, either in an existing worksheet or in a new worksheet. Select OK. A blank pivot table will now be displayed in the Excel workbook. In the field list, either select the fields you want in the row labels, column labels, report filter, or value fields. For example, in the row labels, select customer name and product name. Product name. In the data labels, select the total line sale and the total line cost. Total line cost and total line sale into the values area. For the report filter, select service or inventory and salesman's name. Drag service into the report filter and drag salesman's name into the report filter. As you can see, we have very quickly taken raw data in Excel and by creating a pivot table have created a powerful report that is easy to read. It is now easy to find relationships within the data that are otherwise hard to see because of the amount of detail before. You are now able to organize the data into a format that's easy to chart. And you can now view the same data in many different ways quickly and easily. We have come to the end of the section on creating a simple pivot table using Microsoft Excel 2007. For more information on Simply Accounting Intelligence, visit simplyaccounting.com/intelligence.